What does Le Mans and Adelaide have in common?
Gentlemen, start your engines.
Hello and welcome to a very special episode of the Motor Racing Passion podcast, where we're celebrating 20 years since the Race of 1,000 Years, an international sports car race that took place in Adelaide, Australia, on the full Formula One Grand Prix circuit on New Year's Eve in the year 2000. This is a three-part podcast where we'll be taking a deep dive into the event and discussing all the goings-on that took place leading up, during and after the big race. Joining me, Luke Blattman, to chat about the event. As usual, are my brothers Adam and Daniel and my friend Brock. Why do we remember this race so fondly, given it was scrapped after 1 year?
Well, Luke, it's the equivalent of IMSA rolling into town now at a straight track. So say IMSA announced they're going to run around at the Gold Coast. It's a pretty big deal, really. It's a very big deal, actually. It's a super cool concept.
I think the part is we hadn't really seen anything prior to this event, and obviously, sadly, with the one-off nature of it, we've never seen anything like it since. So, so I think just that one-off, one special time in Adelaide, 20 years ago now, it's, really stuck around.
Yeah, 100% agree with both Brock and Daniel there. The big boys rolled into town with cars that we all have seen run at Le Mans and I guess across America at the time. Great cars, big names that come out. Big event after 1 year, as they said.
Do you think given it only lasted 1 year is probably why we sort of remember it fondly these days?
Yeah, I think it's just as I said, like the uniqueness. It's like so many people, well, we'll touch on, were there, but I mean, I think for myself, I'd be like, how good would it have been to be at the one time only ALMS race in Adelaide? So,
especially because at the time, from memory, it was sort of largely ignored in a way by the sort of the local print and TV media.
Was it totally ignored?
Not totally ignored, but I think at the time it was just at the time sort of, the 500cc Grand Prix was huge. Like we had Rally Australia in WA, which was quite popular. We had the Gold Coast Indy, sort of. I think
it was just another
international race, and also at the time you sort of had the push from V8 Supercars saying that why do we? They were saying to governments saying we've got this product in Australia, and they were trying to convince local government to back V8 Supercar street races. That sort of the sports car race was sort of just another international race.
I think the other thing is I'm not sure. Just your average Australian motorsport fan, how closely they would have followed ALMS back then. I mean, if you go up to the hill at, Winton and ask a bunch of guys if they follow IMSA, I'd say most of them would say no.
No.
So that probably contributed to it not getting the hype that it probably deserved.
But
Channel 10, like they were the event partners.
Yeah.
In it, obviously they didn't show the event live, but they obviously had a bit of skin in the game.
Yeah, they showed highlights of various ALMS, American Le Mans Series rounds that year. But, I mean, just highlights, and I think it was paid for television.
Mm. But I think from my point of view in that, for it there, like if it lasted 2 or 3 years, I think it would have still had the same effect from being the once off that same thing we've been saying, it's the equivalent of IMSA these days rolling in for it. I think if it rolled on for 20 years, I think it would come into, it's the big event coming back again. I've been there 4 or 5 times. I'll watch it from home this time if it was on TV from there. So I think that uniqueness of being only once for it there is what makes it, everyone still talk about it these days.
Yeah. Something interesting is, like, I was raised on racing like all of us, but my dad never told me anything about the race of 1,000 years. I was 7 when it happened, and then I remember he has his model car collection and he had this crocodile car. I was like, what's that? And he goes, oh, that's from the Race of 1,000 Years. And I had never heard of it.
Yeah.
So you're right. It wasn't a big news story at the time.
So I think you mentioned not a lot of people on the hill would know what IMSA is at the hill at Winton. That was one of the things why Don Penos, who we'll touch on in a minute, when he created the series and he named it, why he called it the American Le Mans Series, was he said that the name Le Mans is a name that is one of the, when it comes to racing, it's a name that immediately everyone in the world generally knows. Whereas if he called it, say, the American Sports Car Championship or something, that name doesn't resonate as easily. But the Le Mans name gives an idea of what it is.
No, that probably, yeah, I agree with that for it there. Like same thing as these days, if you equivalize it to the Australian market, you call it a touring car. People, oh, you mean V8 supercars? Well, that's the same effect, the reverse way for that. Yeah. So yeah, 100% like for it.
Well, it's kind of like if you just called the touring car championship the Bathurst Championship or the Bathurst car races.
I think it was good branding by Don Penos, and he obviously that brand's lived on, well, not in America now, but in terms of European Le Mans Series, Asian Le Mans Series. So it's so it is quite an evocative and strong brand.
Yeah.
So,
this was sort of the third attempt at an international sports car race in Australia. Given that in 2000, the way sports car racing had gone, it was basically the de facto world championship, the ALMS. But we tried twice at Sandown in 1984 and 1988, and it hadn't quite got a foothold.
Again, another event I had never heard of because I wasn't born then until you introduced me to it.
Yeah.
And I was going, is that Group C cars at Sandown?
Yeah.
That is so cool. But again, I just didn't know about it. It just didn't get the hype it deserved.
Yeah, they were at the end of the championship year. So, for instance, the first year, you had a lot of Porsches come out in 1984, but some of the other works teams like the Lanciers stayed away. And then by the time it got to 1988, you had the main Saubers and Jaguars came out, but some of the leading privateer Porsches and that stayed away. And that ultimately is what hurts the Race of 1,000 Years as well, in that not all the leading teams came out because it was the end of the year.
So from what I understand, there were a lot of subsidies put in place that essentially wasn't going to cost the teams anything more than a normal round.
Yeah, well, it shouldn't. And that's what a lot of the international events in local series try and do. They don't want the international, they try and get the local promoters to pay the money so it doesn't cost them as much.
but that's like they succeeded in that because I think looking through, there are a number of teams that obviously participated in it and confirmed that it didn't cost them any more. But I think when you look at the likes of BMW and I think it was the Corvette GTS cars as well, that they like it was almost they were just looking for a reason not to, and the fact that traveling 15 hours down to Australia to a race, it was just it wasn't a financial decision in the end, but it was just what were they to gain from it?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll come to sort of the entries of the race in a minute, but a bit of background. So the American Le Mans Series was created by a man named Don Penos, who, amongst other things, he headed the company that invented the nicotine patch, and from there he started up his own company that developed it, and sort of that's how he made his fortune on the back of the nicotine patch. And ultimately, his son had a company called Penos Auto Development, which was funded by Don. And when it was founded in 1989, one of the goals originally of the company was to enter a car at Le Mans with Mario Andretti driving. And that goal eventually came true in 2000 when Mario drove with them at Le Mans. And from there, his interest in motorsports got to 1997, where he had his own car, the Penos Esperante. And it was entered in the FIA GT World Championship and ultimately Le Mans.
It's a very iconic car, isn't it? Silver with the yellow little lip at the front, I think. From
the Vistion sponsorship.
That's right, yeah.
That's a cool car. A lot of people recognise that car. I think its prominence in Gran Turismo helped. But that's a cool car.
And
loud too.
yeah, beautiful sound. By the late 90s, he'd invested in what was then called the Professional Sports Car Racing Championship, which was originally IMSA. It had changed its name in the mid-90s, and he invested in it. And for 1999, Don obviously, I suppose, had ideas for what he could do with a championship, and he did a deal with the ACO, who run the Le Mans 24 Hours. And the deal was that for him to start a series taking the ACO rules, the complete rule set, and applying them to races in America. So for 1999, when it was started, his series basically replaced the Professional Sports Car Racing Championship, and they sanctioned it. And ultimately, he actually bought the complete company, Professional Sports Car Racing, in 2001, and ultimately renamed it to IMSA as a sanctioning body. But it shows from an interest in motor racing that seemed to stem from his son starting up a company, he got very involved very quickly.
People like this are the backbone of motorsport, aren't they, outside of the big manufacturers?
But yeah, it's interesting that, so no involvement prior to that, but obviously
Not that I
son.
could find. Nothing major anyway that I could find.
Interesting. Is his son still involved now? Obviously, we're jumping forward quite a number of years, but
I'm not sure now.
yeah.
I believe he was still involved in the team.
When was the last time a
2000?
panel's raced in a sort of factory sense?
Mid-2000s?
Yeah.
I think they're in the GT class
Yeah,
in
they
the
were.
mid-2000s.
Yeah.
They'd sort of pulled back from outright prototypes by then.
But obviously, yeah, with when the merger happened and things like that, that just appears they have fully retracted from, kind of like a visible role within the sports car scene in the
Yeah,
US.
well, they sold their tracks and everything. 'Cause
Yeah.
They bought up Sebring and Road Atlanta
Yeah.
in that time, and sort of when they merged with Grand Am, sort of all the ownership sort of passed on to Grand Am NASCAR.
Yeah. So it's all in, and then now they're pretty much all out.
Yeah. But no, by the time when he started the ALMS, it was basically, I suppose, he was almost saving American sports car racing because it had fallen a long way from the glory days of the early 90s.
So when it changed from ALMS to what was eventually IMSA, well, like what was the difference between ALMS and PSCR, regulation-wise and car-wise?
Ultimately, they were similar. Professional sports car racing, it was similar to Le Mans rules, but they had their own various interpretations, class as a car, and requirements for different rules. And I think his idea was that if he applied the Le Mans rules to a national series, that way people could come in from overseas and the car rules are set. They know what to expect. Americans can take their cars to Le Mans and the cars are already eligible. And so it just ran locally. And he also established the Petit Le Mans at his own track, Road Atlanta, which is sort of a local nod to the great race at Le Mans. But he had big plans for the ALMS, American Le Mans Series, and in late 1999, it was announced there'd be a race at Adelaide on the old Grand Prix circuit in the 2000 calendar, and it was announced that it would be on New Year's Eve in 2000.
How did Adelaide get thrust to the forefront for the American Le Mans Series to come down under? That's something I've always wondered myself, being around that.
Well, David Brabham, who had signed on to drive for Panoz from 1997, so he was well entrenched in the team by 2000. In late 1999, there's a quote from David Brabham saying that when Don Panoz asked him some time ago where would be the best place in Australia to race, the first word I said to him was Adelaide. So whether that's really what happened, or
I guess in 2000, like the Grand Prix had only sort of recently 4 transitioned
years.
away from there, and it was like the touring car event was like sort of standing alone. Like it was a big event, I guess, in the 2000.
And I think for South Australia too, they were still very dirty that they'd lost the Formula One Grand Prix. So this this was a way to get a international level category back to Adelaide and kind of show off the circuit and the city.
And do we know why they chose the Formula One version of the track rather than the supercar version?
I would say it was FIA length, the track.
Yeah, I just wondered that.
And maybe to set aside a difference between the Clipsal 500 for V8 supercars, which had sort of, I mean, that was a very popular event. I suppose this was just building on the success of that and a way to use the old track.
Yeah, and it's a much better track too.
But the supercars didn't run the F1 layout. They ran their own version.
Yeah, they shortened it, I think, for logistical reasons in the town.
Okay.
But just they had to close less roads off.
It's just interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like a street circuit, you very rarely get two events at a street circuit that run on a different configuration, except for sort of Formula E.
Yeah,
With the exception of that, it's always the same layout.
Yeah.
But with that, at the time of the announcement in 99, did the ALMS run anywhere outside of America? Outside that?
Not in 99, well, Canada, but they, if that counts. But the plan was, the ultimate blueprint which came to fruition was that in 2000, as well as Adelaide, they had announced they'd run 2 races in Europe. So with an ultimate goal was that the races in Europe in 2000 would launch, would springboard into a 2001 European Le Mans Championship, and the race in Adelaide would springboard into the Asia Pacific Le Mans Championship to run alongside the American Le Mans Series, which would... it
was a springboard.
They were going to use the European races to launch the European Series.
Yeah.
The Adelaide race would launch the Asia Pacific Series, and then the idea was from then on they'd run their own series, and Adelaide in years to come would become sort of the grand final for where the ALMS champions, the ELMS champions, and the Asia Pacific champions would come together at the end of the year.
Can't knock the concept.
No, nice.
Great idea.
Sounds really good on paper. What tracks were they going to run at in Europe?
Well, 2000 it got announced they would run at Silverstone and the Nürburgring, and they sort of rebirth. It was a rebirth of the Silverstone 1000 and the Nürburgring 1000,
which
unfortunately
the Grand Prix track.
Unfortunately,
I didn't know that. This just got way cooler.
That would have been.
But when the Adelaide race was announced in '99, there's some good quotes from Don Penoz in the announcement. He says that Adelaide will get all the spectacle of Le Mans without having to get a passport or a plane ticket.
Smart move.
Yeah, he said, if there's a capital of motorsport in Australia, it's Adelaide. Eastern Creek might argue with that, judging by the sign on
the home of Australian motorsport.
On the home of Australian motorsport, Eastern Creek.
Sydney Motorsport Park.
And there's sort of an ominous line that Don comes out with as well. We want to be in Adelaide for as long as the people of South Australia will have us. Rather ominous. He also says in it, my 2 passions in life are drinking and driving, although not at the same time.
It's a bold move when you're launching a race.
Yeah.
I don't know how a quote like that would go down in 2020.
I don't think Heineken would support it.
No. Unless it was Heineken Zero.
Cooper's a major sponsor of the event, though. So
Our local Adelaide brewery.
Yeah.
It also comes to light later on in a March 2004 document called the National Competition Policy Review of the South Australian Motorsport Act 1984. It's revealed in that Penoz Motorsports Australia promoted the race and took all the financial risk, which I would say helps, and it gives another indication how the event got over the line.
And I can't knock this guy. This concept is really cool. He's
backing it. Yeah.
Yeah, like he's walking the walk. I mean, I can't understand how this didn't blow up into something huge. Like, it all sounds rosy at the moment.
And he was putting, he had his own team in the series, and he ultimately committed 3 cars to the race as well in the outright class.
And I wish I was old enough to sort of travel down there by myself and watch this.
Well, so do I. I sort of look back now and I think to myself, so why didn't I go? And I remember I was still in school.
Yeah.
Well, school holidays.
Yeah. It's also revealed the race slogan was New Year, Top Gear, Race Here.
Smooth.
Makes you wonder, do events have slogans these days?
Sometimes the big ones do, occasionally.
Maybe if a new one's getting launched.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a new events but the standard. Well,
The
Indian.
supercar ones do, the special, spectacular super sprint
Oh,
style Sydney.
so they haven't got any better.
Well, I think the big ticket events, they write their own. Like the Le Mans 24-hour. Like you don't need a slogan for the Le Mans 24-hour for a poster.
Maybe in 1923 or whatever year
Well-
it was, they did. Yeah.
You had the person out in the streets spruiking
Yeah.
back then. But like even I think the Petit Le Mans, which we touched on before,
But you know what? It's very American to have a slogan.
it is.
So maybe, yeah. I think in Australia it's like not really our thing, but the Americans are all about theatre and cinema and it's very theatrical.
So ultimately, the 2000 American Le Mans Series is run over 12 races, 9 in America, 2 in Europe, and finished off at Adelaide.
It's running through the schedule. It's a big, we'll get to it later, but I also don't blame some teams for come December not being willing to take up the last round because it's a big schedule.
Yeah.
I think from 12 hours at Sebring in March, going across to Europe for two 1,000-kilometre races, and then
As
back
well
to
as
Sydney
Le
for a
Mans.
6
They,
hour.
they kept the calendar free
Adelaide.
for everyone to go to Le Mans as well.
Yeah, so I'm like, it's a massive schedule.
And it was supposed to be longer because the season, which ultimately opened at Sebring, it was originally supposed to open at a street race in San Diego, which had originally been scheduled for the 99 series, but was put back to 2000 to give organisers more time to prepare. But ultimately, this race fell over because they couldn't meet the timelines to prepare for the race in February.
That's interesting. Never knew.
San Diego would be
never
incredible.
Knew, yeah, San Diego. Never knew they were going to have a race.
And the best one of all, well, not the best one of all, the unfortunate one of all, there was supposed to be a double Asia Pacific swing at the end of the year. There was supposed to be a round in Malaysia at Sepang at the start of December to sort of tie in with Adelaide at the end of December. But after they'd sort of worked out a date of December 3, it was revealed that the race fell during Ramadan and they would struggle to get enough officials.
Bit of an oversight.
Yeah. It's a bit like when they originally announced the 2020 Supercars race at Pukekohe on Anzac Day, and then it was revealed later on, they don't actually have permission to race on Anzac Day at that event.
And so now we're seeing events cancelled and everything. But
Yeah.
I mean, can you guys imagine if this all worked?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't believe how cool this
The
is.
Yeah.
vision, you can't fault the vision at any of this.
No,
It's-
Yeah.
it's awesome.
Well, and it left 2 rounds between 2 months between the final 2 rounds then at Las Vegas and then coming in Adelaide. So I guess in a way that might have also played a part in teams just tapping out after Las Vegas.
What track is in Las Vegas?
Roval. Roval with so Las Vegas Motor Speedway.
Can we please
The oval.
call it a road course? I'm really
No, it's
against-
a Roval.
It's a Roval.
It's the Charlotte Roval, mate.
Yeah, but
Deal with it.
Well, actually, round 2 was on the Charlotte Roval.
Yeah, I was going to say half the championship rival.
do you call it the Daytona Roval or do you call it the Daytona Road
It's
Course?
different though.
Well, I only heard the term Roval since they did the reboot of the track for the NASCAR a couple of years ago. And then everyone seems to be calling it a Roval. I understand it's a road course on an oval, but I'm a traditionalist in that aspect. It's a road course.
I can understand why they'd call, say, Daytona a road course or the Indianapolis track a road course, whereas I would usually term the definition of a Roval on like your 1.5 mile high bank speedway where, they're sort of going up on the oval, down into a chicane, back up on the oval, a little Mickey Mouse infield bit. Then,
I reckon.
well, actually, maybe that sounds like
See,
Daytona, but
my definition in my head is if NASCAR run on it, it's a Roval. So Daytona is now a Roval because the NASCARs were on it.
well,
Different config, they had an extra chicane.
Doesn't matter. See, Charlotte, if it was sports cars running on it, it would be the Charlotte Road Course. But because NASCAR did it, it's
a Roval.
damn Roval, Adam.
I think the backdrop to all this as well, when we're talking about the big visions and the how much Panels was investing in it as well. The launch of Grand Am that obviously is playing out in the background in the United States. That as you said, Don Panels has kind of saved American sports car racing, and then you've got a rival organisation fronting up in 2000 as well.
Yeah.
Obviously heavily affiliated and potentially funded through NASCAR.
yeah.
So yeah, you've kind of got the IndyCar, Champ Car kind of rivalry going there.
As
he's trying to launch some his worldwide expansion.
Yeah. I think they sort of served two different markets, though, in a way. Like, I think Grand Am initially, like, it didn't attract any of the factories outside of Daytona. You never had, Audi wasn't going to run Grand Am or BMW or Panoz or well, obviously Panoz wouldn't, but
No.
I mean, Corvette would do Daytona 24, but the main manufacturer interest was in the American Le Mans series.
No, I agree, but I think more from
you probably lost some privateers.
Yeah, but also you look at the casual viewer too, and trying to not even casual, but even like the motorsport fan, and trying to differentiate two sports car series. You've got a Daytona 24, you've got a Sebring 12, and that kind of thing. I don't think's actually helped it.
Yeah.
Especially when he's trying to launch it and get bigger.
But the 2000 American Le Mans series, it really was a season of two halves. It started off in the Sebring 12 hour where Audi had a works team along with BMW and Panoz in the outright class, and Audi were very dominant with their brand new Audi R8 at Sebring, but then they parked it till June at Le Mans, and they went back to their old 1999 car for the next two rounds, and BMW won the next two rounds at Charlotte on the Roval with JJ Lado and Jörg Muller, and they also won the Silverstone 500 in Europe, which showed actually how competitive the series was, because you had the privateer Raffinelli Lola on pole, and all the different manufacturers in prototype were up the front for the race, and they all had a chance to win, and ultimately BMW did win. Then they went to Le Mans, and then Nürburgring was the fourth round of the season, where Audi started running the R8 again, the 2000 model R8, but the Panoz won. Brabham and Jan Magnussen dominated the event. But then from round 5 onwards, the Audi R8 takes over, and they're not beaten for the rest of the season. Alan McNish and Ronaldo Capello, or Dindo for the rest of the podcast, they end up taking 6 wins for the rest of the year. 5 wins in addition. They won the opener. But, it ends up being a domination for the rest of the year, and the other cars can't get close to them.
No, impressive run. Like, you look at that back half of the season and that momentum they took from Le Mans onward is quite crushing. As you said, BMW got left behind. Panoz valiantly fought on, but just couldn't hold the torch to them. Yeah,
I think BMW had almost lost interest.
Well, exactly. They were eyes fully set on the Formula One world.
Yeah.
For beyond, but
But to give an idea, after 4 rounds, after Nürburgring round 4, before they went back to America for rounds 5 to 11, McNish and Capello were 7th and 8th in points, 40 off the lead BMWs. And by the end of the season, they were miles in front, McNish and Capello. So
it's a great season to watch. You can watch all the 12 rounds on YouTube if you want to put aside a couple of days to work through it. I'm currently eking my way through the Sebring 12 hour, and the coverage is awesome. So do yourself a favour and check it out.
They were sandbagging pre-Le Mans?
Well, they're running the old car, so
I don't.
Maybe they were just saving.
It's just weird. Like they're sort of average, and then Le Mans, and then unbeaten.
Yeah,
but I think it shows you the huge step they made between their R8R, the open top. Oh, sorry, the older car, the 99 car.
Yeah, the 99,
versus the 2000 car.
Yeah.
Because they obviously they rolled out the R8 for Sebring and were super quick. And then obviously they reverted back, and obviously it just shows you those 99 cars. The BMW was a lot stronger.
Yeah.
That was a really good looking car, that BMW.
Is that the
It
Dell?
was, yeah.
I don't know. I
was never really
BMW a lot.
majorly into the open top prototypes.
Really?
But the
Really?
BMW
They were really unique. I like them.
I just think they're classic.
Yeah, they're classic. Adam's right. They're iconic, Luke. They've got their own time.
I much preferred the Audi R8C from 1999. I wish they'd pushed on with that.
Yeah.
The closed top prototype. that they sort of hedged their bets in 99 with an open top and a closed top.
Yeah, they're in 4 cars.
But I mean that.
two of
But I mean
each.
that RHC ultimately formed a bit of a basis for the Bentley attack from 2000 onwards. But further to what you alluded to earlier with the round not costing, the Adelaide event shouldn't cost any more than any other round. One of the big sort of offerings that the American Le Mans Series put in place for the Adelaide race was they put some very generous freight and travel subsidies in place for people to get to the race. And amongst other things, one of the provisos was that, as Brock said, the race shouldn't cost any more than any of the normal rounds. But also all the team members would receive a subsidised Aussie vacation with their families. There was free accommodation for 4 members per team from December 20 to January 3. That's a proper holiday they were giving them. And accommodation for a wife or partner was free, and all the other accommodation at reduced rates. They also, Adam would be a good person to ask for this. The regular series competitors were offered a 40-foot container for $15,000 per car. Is that a good deal or?
Back in 2000.
Back in 2000.
Is that US or AUD?
I'm assuming
I'd
that'd
say
be
US.
US, and I'd say air freight as well
Probably.
for it there, because especially even though it was a 2-month break from Las Vegas to Adelaide for it there, by sea freight, I think these days it's 45 days, I think, from Anaheim to Sydney. I think it's around about 44, 45 days in that there, and clear customs past that. So I reckon that might be air freight back in the day for it there. For that, I reckon on a group deal these days, usually it's subsidised for the season for most Asian series where you do it there for it. But yeah, it's probably competitive at the time. So.
One thing, there's a quote from John Penos in the article about the freight and travel subsidies. He says, this is a fabulous opportunity for people to not only finish the series in style, but also enjoy the biggest party they'll attend for 1,000 years. I hope the packages we've put together will give teams the incentive they need to see in the real millennium properly. One point, they seem to really make a big point that this is the real millennium celebration.
That's why it's called the Race of 1,000 Years.
Yep.
That's why they called it that.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Again, very American, very theatrical.
But I guess that goes back into his statement earlier about I like to drink and drive, not at the same time. He's got the thing come for this great race, but then enjoy it, have a holiday, let's party, let's do all that. So, which is also the American way. Let's do it big both ways.
It's working because we're going through all this and I wish I was there.
But that doesn't say he's thought of every aspect of it.
Yeah.
It's not he's just put on a race and made a lot of noise. He's actually, as you said, he's walking the walk by providing travel arrangements, incentives for family members, holidays, race. So as I
Can't knock him.
no.
I think what's coming through is he sees the series as a family.
And he's really passionate about it.
He considers everyone, even if you're on different, he wants everyone to be included. I mean, family deals and things like that in there to bring your whole family out. And I mean, for a holiday, you out here for Christmas and all that. It's
it almost seems like he wants it for everyone in the series to be like the end of season trip.
for sure. Yeah,
like,
I'm sure it was. Yeah, but it sees it. He sees it as a family, not just as a racing series.
Yeah.
But I did find it. Yeah, that there was a big push made that this was the real millennium, not 99 into 2000 was the sort of millennium celebration, which I suppose technically is right. Although it's not as cool to see a clock tick over from
000
to 01 as it was to see 4 digits change from 99 to 2000. But amongst the other noteworthy things leading into this race was there was a new camera system that was going to be introduced called the Navicam that would use GPS tracking to make the car on screen stand out more. Now, when we watched the race in preparation, did you notice the cars standing out more on camera?
No.
No.
And have you noticed it ever since?
The only thing I'd say was potentially watching it on YouTube, there might have been some
Quality.
yeah, the high, well, not high definition back then, but the definition might have been a little bit lost. So I'll give them a pass there.
One of the more unfortunate aspects of the advertising for the race was so there was an advertisement that used to play on TV, usually during the Channel 10 American Le Mans Series episodes during the year leading up to the race, where they played the ad for it. And amongst other things on the ad, there's a line from JJ Leto saying, "We all can't wait to come down under." Of course, JJ Leto and the BMW team don't end up coming. There's also in the ad for Adelaide, it advertises Corvette and Ferrari.
Yeah.
Neither of them showed up.
They did well.
And there's a line in the ad that says CF 1 stars, Alboreto, Lado, Brabham and Johansson. Well, 3 of those 4 didn't turn up.
Hey, there was at least one Formula
At least
1 star.
Brabham did. Well, there was a few in the end who'd run F1 there.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, why was Emanuele Pirro not in the ad?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a bit unfortunate. I mean, months out, you've got to take a punt.
Yeah, correct. I don't think that affected anything.
No,
anything.
not at all. But when you look back on it, it was a shame Audi didn't bring Michele Alboreto, given he was a contracted Audi driver. And
Yes, yeah. Well, and then obviously the events that followed as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
so if we turn our attention to sort of the entry list to the race and who was coming and who wasn't coming, there's a real soap opera that went on during the year with regards to particularly the top 3 major teams in the series, which were Panoz, Audi and BMW, as to who would be running in the race. And there's none more so than the Panoz soap opera that led up to the event. So it started off early in the year where Don Panoz offered Mark Noske, a young up and coming Australian driver at the time. He offered him a test at Road Atlanta for August that year. And he says that he's looking for a driver for Adelaide. Now, before the test takes place, there's an article where Mark Noske is announced as a Panoz driver for Adelaide, and that he would join a 3-car Panoz team. So I suppose that was the first announcement that Panoz would run 3 cars rather than the usual 2. And he was likely to partner test driver Klaus Graf or their endurance driver at Le Mans, Pierre-Henri Raffinel. Now, when you heard that, Daniel, what was your first comment?
I was, happy there'd be an Australian element to it. However, Mark Noske,
I reckon he was pretty good.
But I believe your comment was surely he paid for it.
Well, yes, and without being harsh to Mark Noske too. Obviously, his father was heavily involved in PH Scuderia at the time, and obviously,
so that's Prancing Horse Racing, who it ultimately turned out were coordinating the Australian end of the Panoz effort at the race.
Yeah, and obviously,
to start with, anyway,
well known to be quite well funded operation. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think Noske had some Indy Lights tests and things in the preceding year. So, yeah, money was no obstacle for the Noskis when it came to slotting people into drives.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a Mark Noske fan, actually. I like it.
Yeah, and sorry, I'm not. Let's not slotting.
He was a very good driver.
And did some great things.
Holding young
in
line.
The Ferrari. Yeah,
But
and I don't want to go too far down the tangent here, but he did then after a while disappear from the Australian kind of scene.
Yeah, sort of mid to after the WPS Falcon deal,
which he says was the worst move of his career.
Yeah, especially as I think he lined up the WPS deal initially. They came and sponsored him.
Anyway, we've massively
we're getting massively off track there. Yeah. But it's interesting to hear Don Penoz's quote when originally Mark Noske was announced to drive the car. So Don had been at the 2000 Clipsal 500 earlier in the year. I suppose just, tying up.
Was it called the Clipsal 500 in 2000?
For the first time.
That was the first time, okay.
Yeah.
Sensational Adelaide 500 before. Yeah, I'd say it was kind of lukewarm Adelaide 500.
And Mark Noske was racing there in the Nations Cup in a Ferrari 360 in Modena. And so Don says that he was very impressed with Mark's efforts when he saw him race the Ferrari in Adelaide. He was fast and aggressive, and I was very impressed with his attitude and talent. And he also says he always wanted to give a young Aussie a go on home soil. Now, I mean, you can't really compare a Ferrari 360 to a Penhoz sports car.
I don't know.
Front end.
They've got 4 wheels.
Steering.
But I mean, it was very much a production spec Ferrari 360 Nations Cup at the time.
They're both red.
Well, yeah, they are.
Different shade of red, though.
But it and Mark Noski's quoted as saying so he'd lost his HRT drive earlier in the year for Bathurst. So he says after missing out on Bathurst, to do Adelaide will be one hell of a bonus. And he said it was a great honour to be chosen for it. But also comes to light that he won't test the car till it's in Australia. He won't get the Road Atlanta test later in the year.
That's a shame, actually, because that's a pretty cool track, I reckon, to have a go in a panels around.
Yeah. So it also gets announced not long after that his partner for the race of 1,000 years won't be Klaus Graf or Pierre-Henri Raffinel. It'll be Craig Lowndes, who says wants to do Le Mans, and he was looking forward to teaming up with Mark Noski.
Just like BMW.
Exactly. So, but at the time in 2000, Craig Lowndes is going through a bit of a contract debacle where he's looking to leave the Holden Racing team and go elsewhere for the new year. But if his contract is in place with HRT till the end of 2000, so he's got to seek a release to race at Adelaide, which is obviously, well, the race ends 2 hours before his contract ends. So he's announced as driver, and there's promotional posters done that list him, have photos of him and Mark Noski. The HRT boss, John Crennan, says that HRT are willing to release him, but they need a written request. Because it comes to light later on that there's a news article saying that HRT blocked him to drive at Le Mans, despite all the promotion going out that he's race at Adelaide, sorry.
Yeah, I just find that whole sequence really weird, especially Crennan rolling out that all they need is in writing, and they had no issue with releasing him. When you peel back the layers a little bit, and it seems quite obvious that they're dirty about him leaving the team at the end of the year and are going to stand in his way of actually going and racing. I thought that was pretty dog.
Is it true? Like, is that true?
Well, Prancing Horse Racing say that when they were trying to find local drivers for the Penhoz, they say that HRT lawyers sent them a letter telling them not to approach Lowndes or legal action would be taken. And Lowndes himself is quoted as saying, I was given permission at the time to do the Adelaide race, but that has now changed.
Yeah, wow. Disgraceful, isn't it?
So
that would have been a big scoop for the race to get Lowndes, because that would have drawn in a whole group of Lowndes supporters who would have come watch it, who may have 50% of them may have watched it anyway because they're motor racing fans. Yeah. But ones that were just specific in touring cars, like it could have brought in a whole different element.
Poor Lowndes, like even with his Le Mans endeavours, and he just can't get over there now. Yeah, that's a shame actually.
Yeah, quite petty in hindsight, very petty, and at the time, totally unnecessary.
Yeah.
So,
and it's announced then that Greg Murphy will be Lowndes' replacement in the car.
That's a pretty cool replacement, though.
Yeah. And I mean, not that this is the gauge of right and wrong necessarily, but Auto Action magazine did an internet poll on HRT's decision to stop Lowndes racing at Adelaide, and it said that 74.27% thought HRT were wrong.
So,
which is interesting, given HRT was the popular fan favourite team at the time.
So, who's Greg Murphy driving for then? Holden.
Kmart.
So who owned that?
No, 2000 he was Gibson Motorsport.
Okay.
In the Kmart Commodore, but it wasn't part of the TWR empire.
Yeah,
at the time.
Also, he wasn't leaving for Ford.
Yeah, true. Which but still, there's some hypocrisy in that. From Holden.
Love to know if all that's 100% watertight.
Yeah,
it just sounds crazy.
Yeah.
Maybe it is true. I don't know.
And it comes to light not long after that Jason Bright will take over the second Penhoz seat alongside Murphy in place of Mark Noski, who it said the Penhoz team are quoted as saying Noski fell foul of a lack of finance to cement his place. So it seems you were right, Daniel.
Well, no, just looking at its the cards on the table there, it just struck me as odd that Don Panos picks out Mark Noske
From
out of
nowhere.
all the drivers available in
So
Australia.
Mark never got to drive the car then.
No.
Yeah.
Brabham and Murphy Murphy and
Bright,
Bright get to test it in America before the race. So in the end, that American test does take place. And then David Brabham ultimately ends up becoming the third driver in that
I'm
car.
enjoying this. This is all so interesting. I was too young to know any of this. This is cool.
Yeah. So they end up forming a bit of a Australasian team for the race because the original plan is for David Brabham and Jan Magnussen, the usual teammates at Panos, to drive the brand new car, the 2001 model.
Oh, because they were stoked. Bright and Murphy in the 2000 car.
Yeah. So Brabham and Magnussen were going to drive the new car, but it comes to light there's a bit of development issues with it, and they want Brabham in the most prominent car for the race, the one with the best chance.
Don wants the event to be successful. Brabham, hometown driver, wants him to be in the lead car, and smart call. Like, obviously they had that new car turned out to be an absolute pig.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, but no, a real shame Lowndes couldn't run. But there was a lot of rumours that went around with Don Panos was obviously using his cars to try and get some names to the race. So amongst the rumoured drivers to be part of the lineup at Adelaide during the year was that he tried to get Mario and Michael Andretti together.
How good.
In a car for the race. Because Mario had driven for Panos at Le Mans that year, as we mentioned earlier. But Mario wouldn't refuse to racing at Adelaide because he didn't feel like he was up to par with his performance at Le Mans. And basically Don was hoping that using Michael Andretti to race might sway Mario to go and do it, but that obviously came to nothing.
Would have been, you look at that track and what transpired, it would have been pretty brutal on Mario.
Well, he did come back a couple of years later to practice at Indy.
He did, and look how
that was pretty
turned
brutal.
out. Yeah.
I think that was much more brutal than Adelaide would be. Now, Klaus Ludwig was also linked to a Panos seat. That one hit me for 6. I didn't know that at the time. Klaus, he'd retired after 1998 and then came back to do DTM in 2000 with Mercedes. But then to be linked to a seat at Adelaide in a Panos was a bit left field. The seat ultimately ended up going to Klaus Graf, the Panos test driver, to drive alongside Jan Magnussen in the 2001 model Panos. But whether something got lost in translation between the two Klauses, it would have been great for Klaus Ludwig to race, though.
Yeah, that would have been.
He was a sports car stalwart. And
it shows you how far and wide. It comes back to it as well. Don was willing to do whatever it was to have the best chance of success for the event.
Yeah.
So
it's also announced in lead up to the race that the drivers of the second Panos in 2000, Johnny O'Connell and Hiroki Kato, were being replaced after Adelaide for 2001. So they have a drive, and 2 hours later they're out of contract. So Audi were, as we've mentioned earlier, Audi were the dominant force in the 2000 American Le Mans Series. It's interesting to note that at the start of the year, the effort was announced to be North American funded, Audi North America funded, and that the funding wouldn't extend to Europe or Adelaide. But ultimately, in the end, they end up committing to all the races. And they start off the year by saying that probably will be there. The decision has not been taken when it came to Adelaide as the year rolled on. And the organisers of Adelaide were apparently trying to get Tom Christensen in to partner Frank Bieler and Emmanuel Piero in one of the in the second works Audi. To sort of, I suppose they wanted to. Those three won Le Mans together in 2000, so I guess they wanted to bring the dream team back together. But there's an interesting quote during the year from Tom Christensen, where he's asked about what he thinks of Adelaide and the event at Adelaide, and another bit of an ominous quote. He says, "It's an event that is already a success before it has started."
Well, it is.
But I like
mean,
it. Yeah.
On paper, it is a success. I mean, like we've said it 1,000 times. This just sounds awesome. So,
And
I agree with him.
And Christensen says he wants to do the race, but it's likely only if the teams need 3 drivers.
And
Which is a bit of a shame.
race, not likely. Yeah.
Which it turned out they may have.
Actually, yes, in the end, it was possibly they probably did need 3 drivers for the car. It was looking that way on the Saturday anyway.
Because where was Christensen at his career at that point in 99 or 2000 at that point?
He'd won Le Mans in 97 on debut, but in 2000 he was driving in the British Touring Car Championship for Honda.
Yeah.
And 98, 99 he'd done the German STW Cup for
so it was very
for Honda
early
as well,
on.
yeah.
Prior, yeah, okay.
Yeah, but it's sort of he was doing a bit of sports car racing but one really cool thing that came up in the lead up to Adelaide with regards to Audi was they unveiled a paint scheme for Alan McNish and Dindo Capello's car in a crocodile livery.
Isn't that an iconic paint scheme? Like when you think Audi R8, that's one of the first open top sports car ones that you think of, the crocodile paint scheme in my mind.
Up there with the Bathurst 12-hour tribute in 2015.
Yeah. Well, I think that crocodile livery defines the race.
Ooh, big call.
Defines the race. You know, like
Well, that's what.
crocodile,
You think about it, sticks out.
Yeah. So one noticeable omission from the race of 1,000 years was the Works BMW prototypes, run by Schnitzer in 2000. Now, at the start of the year, they announced a full it was made out they announced a full campaign, but if you have a look at it, they never actually committed. It's announced at the start of the year that Schnitzer will prepare the cars, the great Schnitzer team, and that Jorg Muller, JJ Lato and Bill Oberlin will be the drivers. And it was expected Joe Winkelhock, or Smokin' Joe as we know him, would be the 4th driver. But at the last minute, BMW releases him and it gets announced he's doing the DTM with Opel in 2000. And BMW basically say they didn't want to stand in the way of what he wanted to do. So ultimately, Jean-Marc Gounon, former F1 driver, gets announced as the 4th driver. But it is made out that BMW North America is funding the team and that they'll still do Nürburgring and Silverstone because they're quoted as saying, we're planning to do the full season. We should take the opportunity when there are 2 races in Europe. But there's no mention of Adelaide in that, but they do say full season. Now, during the year, there was obviously some intention to do Adelaide because Formula One driver in 2000 for Prost, John Alesi, gets linked to driving a Schnitzer BMW at Adelaide.
That would have been huge.
Yeah, that would have been great because he was friends with Gerhard Berger, who was the BMW Motorsport boss at the time.
I think once again, the positioning of this event is so, like obviously New Year's Eve, so late in the year. BMW were committed to doing the 2 European rounds, even though it was North American funded. But once again, they kind of weigh that up and they go 2001, things are really cracking on with their Formula One campaign. And do you know what I mean? It's so late in the year. Yeah. What are they gaining from it? Championship's already done.
Yeah. Well, it says that Alesi's participation rested on Alain Prost, his F1 team owner, giving the approval. But BMW says he should be available for it, but it was a moot point in the end. Although the article from Crash.net does say that Schnitzer is yet to commit to Adelaide, but would commit if they were still in title contention, which ultimately they weren't after the second last round in Las Vegas. And when the announcement does come through, it gets announced that, as I said, they pull out after they lose contention for the title, and they're going to spend December testing the new GT class BMW M3 for 2001. The quote from Mario Thiessen from BMW says, "Our decision takes immediate effect. Adelaide is bound to be a spectacular event, even though the titles are already accounted for."
It's not Mario Tyson.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yes.
Was.
Yeah. Thank you for the correction. Charlie Lamb, the Schnitzer team manager, says that on New Year's Eve we'll no doubt be thinking of Australia rather wistfully, but deep down we'll all be glad to be back home in Bavaria with our families after our lengthy American visits. And it's also announced that Bill Oberlin, who'd driven the prototype all year, would still be in Adelaide driving the GT class BMW M3 for PTG Motorsport.
Charlie Lamb's one there is a classic way of saying thank you, but no thanks.
Well,
it's kind of like saying, it'll be great, but we're not going to be there, but have a good time.
All I can think of is there must have been a really good BMW New Year's Eve party planned.
Well,
And they've gone, Mario and Charlie have been on the phone and thought, could go to Australia, but we don't want to miss.
should we
Don't-
spend
don't-
$500,000 going to Australia, or should we
We don't want to
throw a
miss the New
party
Year's
for
Eve party.
$500,000?
The problem for BMW was Hans Stuck, who was the lead driver of their GT class BMW with P2G Motorsport, which Bill Auberlin was joining. So he turned 50 on January 1 and was also ducking off to the Great Barrier Reef straight after the race for his honeymoon.
Taking full advantage of Don's offer.
Yeah.
He's done that perfectly.
So you can wonder the phone call. You can see Mario and Charlie have come up with a great plan. We won't go to Adelaide. We'll
Do this.
we'll go to the BMW New Year's Eve party. It's going to go off. And then one of them's come to their attention. What about Hans? It's his birthday. Sorry, Bill. we'll send you down with even though he drove a different car, but you can represent the prototype team down there. But yeah, so it does also say at one point BMW were thinking of continuing with the V12 LMR prototype in 2001, but ultimately
Didn't happen.
it didn't end up happening. One side note to BMW, the PTG BMW team, is they won the Cooper's Home Brew competition during 2000
Prestigious award. That one.
ALMS rounds. Yeah, so they won with their brand of beer called the Check the Splitter Bitter.
Not a bad one.
Would you like to try that?
Probably tastes better than Furphy.
I don't know about that.
Nah, Furphy's all right.
Don't know about that.
Joking, Furphy.
Yeah, there's an opportunity here for your Furphy too, if you can.
I've snuck a few Furfies down at the 12 hour out of Luke's esky, don't worry.
But from Australian interest, when it came to sort of local entries for the race, Jim Cornish, who'd been running in the Australian Super Touring Championship for a few years.
Visit your vet Honda Accord.
Yes, yep. He did a deal to drive what was in reality an LMP 675 car, or what nowadays we call LMP2, but it was the only LMP 675 car entered in the race, so they just got bumped up into the outright prototype class. But he was supposed to drive a car called a Pilbeam. He went to Silverstone and tested the car. So I mean, that from where the Australian Super Touring Championship was in 2000 to get
not
a
bad.
drive like that is
Yeah, no.
pretty good. And he was going to drive with Michael Malik, who was the son of Ray, who ran Ray Malik Engineering, won the British Touring Car Championship in 1999 with Nissan, and Jamie Wall, who Australian people would know from he did the 98 Bathurst 1000 with Mark Adderton in a Honda Accord.
He did the opening round in Lakeside. as well.
99, yeah. And he also did the 97 British Touring Car Championship in a Vauxhall. But so that ended up not running, which we'll come to in a later part of the podcast. But there were a few other Australians who ended up on the entry list. We had Alan Heath, who was running V8 supercars at the time. Ray Lintott ended up in a Chamberlain Engineering Viper. Darren Palmer and Christian DeGostin got in a Porsche.
Christian D'Agostino, I believe.
Was it called Channel 7? Was it Channel 7 coverage back then?
Yeah. And even Des Wall got a start in the in a Rowan Skay Porsche. Rowan Skay, an Australian-born international businessman who had a couple of Porsches running in the race. But so it was good to see a few Australians get on the grid.
That's what, yeah. With from your Brabs, Bright. I don't know if we'll count Murph as a Kiwi, but yeah, it's a good
We always
representation.
claim the Kiwis.
So we'll include Murph in this one.
Exactly.
Yeah, but so good range too. You go from super touring, sports sedans. I believe Darren Palmer was in F3 at the time, and up to V8. So yeah, no, good representation of the Australian motorsport scene.
So just to finish up the first part of the episode, I got a bit of a question for you guys. It was announced in the lead up to the race that after the race, there would be so many people at the event that they're going to need 2 concerts. And you had 2 choices. You could go to the pit-side party featuring In Excess with John Stevens, along with Taxi Ride, or you could go to the New Year's Revolution concert on CBC Oval, which was headlined by The Living End, UMI and Spiderbait. So where are you going to go after the race?
Go on the Kylie Minogue concert, Luke. 2000 Kylie Minogue. She was the big star. I'd be going to that one.
She wasn't at Adelaide though.
Oh,
Oh, brutal.
she was a part of In Excess. God, I'm showing my age.
I'm a big
one
Tim
point.
Rogers fan. I'd go to the UMI gig.
You all right? Where are you going, Adam?
Probably In Excess for me.
Yeah, I'd go to NXS.
Go from my time back at there from growing up. Heard a lot of In Excess. So
I'll
yeah.
go to Living End. Punk rock 2000s. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, not the real NXS. So
Yeah. Wow. Or 4/5. And fronted by John Stevens.
Didn't Powderfinger play or something?
Not in my notes here.
Maybe I misread that somewhere.
What about you, Luke?
Oh, NXS.
In Excess for you?
Easy choice. So that's where we'll end the first part of our episode. Join us for part 2, where we'll focus on the race itself and the debacle that happens after the event. Thanks to Daniel, Adam and Brock. I'm Luke Blackman, and we'll be back for part 2 very soon. Motor Racing Passion is produced by Luke Ryan for Tum Drum Media.